The kind that stretches just enough to look polite, but never reaches the eyes. From day one, I could sense it. My boss wasn't someone who valued loyalty, hard work, or growth. He valued control, power, obedience, and I was just another cog in his well-oiled machine. A machine he thought would run forever, so long as people like me kept their heads down and mouths shut. But I wasn't always this way. I joined his company with hope in my heart and fire in my belly. I believed in the dream. I showed up early, stayed late, took on responsibilities that weren't even mine just to prove I belonged. And for a while, it worked. He praised my efforts in front of others, handed me more tasks, made promises of promotion and future opportunities. I fell for all of it. I thought I was being groomed for something bigger. I thought I was earning a seat at the table. What I didn't realize was that I was being used. Every time I went the extra mile, he banked it like currency. Every idea I contributed in meetings, he claimed as his own in front of senior leadership. Every crisis I solved, he took the credit. And when the spotlight came around, he stood in it proudly while I remained invisible in the shadows, clapping for a man who was quietly draining me dry. Still, I pushed through. I kept telling myself that my time would come. That good work doesn't go unnoticed forever. That if I just stayed patient, the universe, or at least this company, would reward me. But life doesn't always reward patience. Especially not when you're surrounded by people who see kindness as weakness and loyalty as leverage. The shift began subtly. One day, I was left out of an important email chain. Then a project I was supposed to lead was reassigned without any explanation. The office chatter started dying down when I walked into the room. My boss stopped making eye contact. He'd pass by my desk and look right through me as if I had become furniture. Silent, unimportant, unseen. I asked him once if everything was okay. He smiled that same cold smile and said, "Of course everything's fine. Just focusing on restructuring." Restructuring. That word became a ghost that haunted the halls of the company. People started disappearing. Quiet exits, empty desks, no goodbyes. And still, I worked harder. Still, I tried to prove my value, tried to stay indispensable. Because that's what we're taught, right? Work harder, be irreplaceable, and you'll be safe. But I was never safe. The meeting that morning wasn't on my calendar. I was called in with a short message from HR. "Please report to conference room 3 at 10 a.m. I walked in to find him sitting there, flanked by 2 HR reps, holding a file with my name on it. He didn't look up. One of the reps did the talking. "Due to internal changes and shifting business priorities, your position has been made redundant. This decision is final and effective immediately." I didn't speak. Not at first. I just stared at him, waiting, hoping that he'd say something, anything. An apology, a reason, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. Nothing. When I finally asked why, he gave me a rehearsed line. "You're talented, but the company's moving in a different direction. This isn't personal." But it was personal. He had used me, drained me, and discarded me the second I was no longer convenient. There was no gratitude, no handshake, no recognition of years I had given to build his success. Just a cold dismissal and a security escort. I remember standing outside the building with a cardboard box of my things, watching others pass me by like I was invisible. My nameplate, my coffee mug, my framed photo, all jammed into that box like they meant nothing. That's how fast it happens. 1 minute you're inside, building someone else's dream. The next, you're outside, wondering where you went wrong. But even then, on that humiliating, soul-crushing day, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I walked away from that building with nothing but a cardboard box and a storm inside my chest. My identity had been so tightly wrapped around that job, that title, that routine, that for the first few days, I felt like a ghost. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. No early morning alarm, no meetings to prepare for, no emails to respond to, just silence, and a growing sense of emptiness that settled in my bones. People around me offered the usual lines. You'll bounce back. Everything happens for a reason. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. But those words felt hollow. Easy to say when it's not your life that's just been upended. Easy to say when you're not staring at bills piling up, or questioning whether all those years of hard work meant anything at all. The first week passed in a blur. I slept too much, ate too little, spent hours just sitting by the window, trying to figure out what to do next. My confidence had taken a brutal hit. I kept replaying moments in my head, wondering if I had done something wrong, if there had been signs I missed, if I had trusted the wrong people for too long. And with every replay, the anger grew. Not just at him, for betraying me, but at myself, for letting it happen. But then something changed. One night, I opened my old notebook. It was filled with ideas I had jotted down over the years. Business concepts, problems I wanted to solve, systems I had dreamed of building. At the time, I never acted on them. I was too busy being loyal, too busy helping someone else build their dream. Now, for the first time, I had the time and the fire to consider building something of my own. So I started small. I cleared out a corner of my apartment and made it my workspace. No fancy setup, just a second-hand desk, a laptop, and a whiteboard. I mapped out my strengths, what skills I had, what I knew about the industry, where the gaps were that no one was paying attention to. I began watching online lectures, reading business books, devouring articles about startups and side hustles. Knowledge became my fuel. Every page I turned, every new thing I learned, made me feel like I was slowly piecing myself back together. I took freelance gigs, anything that paid. It wasn't glamorous, and the money was barely enough to get by. But it taught me how to manage time, how to deal with clients, how to hustle without a safety net. More importantly, it gave me control. No one could fire me from my own grind. And through that hustle, something began to grow. I noticed a pattern, a problem that I had dealt with in my old job, one that many companies in the industry still hadn't solved. I saw an opportunity, something small, but real. And for the first time, I didn't brush it aside. I began crafting a solution. I built a prototype, designed branding, created a pitch deck. I reached out to people, not as a desperate job seeker, but as someone with something valuable to offer. Rejections came, sure. Some didn't reply. Others didn't get it. But with every no, I refined the idea. With every door that closed, I knocked on two more. I stopped thinking like an employee and started thinking like an architect. Someone who didn't need permission to build. Someone who didn't need validation to move forward. The loneliness was real. There were days I doubted everything. Days I missed the false sense of security that came with a paycheck. Days when failure felt inevitable. But I kept showing up, kept working, kept building. I remembered how he used to talk down to me, how he thought I was just a disposable piece in his game. And that memory, it didn't break me. It drove me. Piece by piece, brick by brick, I was constructing something that belonged to me. It didn't matter how small it started. What mattered was that it was mine. And as it grew, so did I. It started with research, deep, relentless research. I knew the industry inside out, but now I was looking at it through a different lens. I wasn't just trying to survive anymore. I was trying to build something that could compete with a man who threw me out like I was nothing. Every hour I had previously poured into building his empire, I now redirected into creating a roadmap to destroy it. Not through anger or sabotage, but through sheer strategic precision. I began dissecting his business model. I knew how it worked. I had been part of the inner workings. I understood his supply chain, his vendors, his client base, his weaknesses, and his blind spots. I understood what frustrated customers behind closed doors, what his employees whispered about when he wasn't around. I wasn't planning revenge through petty acts. I was planning it by doing everything better than he ever did. He relied heavily on outdated systems, things that worked a decade ago but were falling apart in the modern age. He was arrogant, confident that his name and his position were enough to keep the ship afloat. But the cracks were visible to anyone who looked closely enough, and I looked very closely. I focused on the pain points: fast service, transparent pricing, clean communication. I made it my mission to provide what his clients always wanted but never got. I crafted my service to be leaner, faster, more modern. I didn't have the luxury of a big budget, but I had agility. While his company dragged its feet through red tape and ego, I was adapting daily, optimizing every touchpoint, making every decision with speed and precision. My first few clients were small, but they mattered more than any paycheck I'd ever received. Each client I won from him felt like taking back a part of my dignity. Word started spreading. People remembered me. Former clients who had once worked with me under his brand started reaching out. Not out of pity, but because they remembered how I worked, how I solved problems, how I listened. I didn't have to talk badly about him. I didn't have to expose his flaws or mistakes. His arrogance did that for me. As I stayed quiet and focused, his own reputation began to rot from within. I offered solutions. He made excuses. I delivered on time. He overpromised and underdelivered. I stayed hungry and adaptable. He stayed comfortable and lazy. Bit by bit, I started pulling key accounts away from him. Clients he took for granted began to leave quietly. A few employees who had once sat beside me started reaching out too. They were tired of the same toxic leadership, the same lack of vision. Some of them joined me, not because I paid more, but because they saw where I was going. I reinvested every cent I made, upgraded the systems, improved customer experience, trained the people who joined me to operate with the same standard I held myself to. No shortcuts, no inflated egos, just execution, consistency, and accountability. It didn't matter if we were small. We were efficient, precise, and hungry. I watched his brand slip. Online reviews started to shift. Longtime clients started to speak out. Deadlines were missed. Customer service fell apart. One of his oldest partners pulled out, and I knew exactly why. Because I had given them a better option, a smarter option, a human option. What burned in me wasn't rage. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when you've been through the fire. I wasn't building a business to prove something to the world. I was proving it to myself. That I was never disposable. That I was never weak. That I didn't need his platform to rise. I tracked the numbers quietly. His revenues dipped. My traction increased. I didn't need headlines or recognition. The results were enough. And through it all, I never looked back. I just kept focusing on the next move, the next improvement, the next strategy that would push me one step further ahead. It didn't happen overnight. Revenge, when done right, is never loud in the beginning. It's slow, calculated, and surgical. From the outside, it probably looked like he was still winning. Posting photos from his office, celebrating fake milestones on social media, acting like nothing had changed. But underneath that surface, the rot had begun to spread. His business wasn't just declining, it was bleeding from every corner. And the worst part? He didn't even realize it until it was far too late. Clients started leaving without warning. They didn't cause scenes. They didn't write angry emails. They just stopped renewing contracts. stopped taking his calls. They had found someone better. Someone who didn't just know their needs but actually listened, responded, and delivered. Every time. That someone was me. His revenue started to dip. At first, it was subtle. A small decrease here, a late payment there. But within a few months, the cracks became impossible to ignore. High-ticket clients, the ones who had carried his business for years, were gone. He tried offering discounts, tried begging some of them to stay. But it was already too late. I had built something stronger, something cleaner, something smarter. And the market had spoken. Inside his company, the energy shifted. The same employees who once feared him started doubting him. Rumors spread. Questions about money, about leadership, about the future. Productivity dropped. Resignations began to pour in. A few of those letters landed on his desk with my name whispered in the background. His people were choosing me over him. And not just for jobs, but for vision, for belief, for respect. He tried to fight back, launched a rebranding campaign, spent money on marketing, hoping to mask the internal collapse with flashy colors and empty slogans. But branding can't fix what's broken at the core. Clients saw through it. Employees laughed behind closed doors. I didn't need to respond. I just kept delivering, kept growing, kept rising. He even tried to copy me. I saw it. The new features on his website, the service models that looked suspiciously similar to mine, the shift in his tone. But he was too late. He was trying to become what I already was, while I was already 10 steps ahead. He was reacting. I was evolving. And then the layoffs began. Quietly at first. A department here, a manager there. Cost-cutting disguised as optimization. But everyone knew. Word spread fast in our industry. His name began to lose weight. People stopped returning his calls. Investors started backing out. The cracks became craters. I heard about the internal meetings, desperate strategy sessions, panic over numbers, blame being thrown in every direction. I had once sat in that office, quiet and underestimated. Now the same walls echoed with confusion and regret. Not mine, his. Eventually, his business started defaulting on contracts. Vendors began pulling out. Lawsuits followed. Small ones at first, unpaid invoices, broken agreements. But they piled up. And so did the pressure. One day, I got a message from one of his former top clients. They wanted to fully transition to my company. Not just for business, but for partnership. They said they'd never felt heard until they worked with me. That was the moment I realized something powerful. I hadn't just taken down his business. I had replaced it. His empire didn't explode in some dramatic, Hollywood-style scene. It eroded, quietly, systematically, from the inside out. And every brick that fell was one he had placed with arrogance, laziness, and ego. He thought firing me would free him from a threat. He never imagined it would create his biggest one. People who once looked up to him began erasing his name from their networks. He became a cautionary tale, a whisper at conferences, a lesson in what happens when you underestimate the very people who help build your success. I didn't celebrate it publicly. I didn't need to. The satisfaction was in the silence. The kind that follows a storm after it has done its damage. He tried to pivot, to start over, but the industry had moved on, and I had become the name people trusted, the brand people respected, the competitor he never saw coming.